Okay, so welcome everyone to this course on labor economics. We are going to look at the introduction to labor economics, the very first item on our course outline. And so by the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand the concepts of labor economics and also have an overview of how the labor markets work and how the labor market institutions also work. And so when we talk about labor economics, we should get to understand that labor economics is another branch of economics. The two main branches of economics are microeconomics and macroeconomics. And we have studied one of the other branches of economics, which is managerial economics, when you were in your second year. Now, for this course, we are considering the labor economics, but know that there are other branches: environmental economics, resource economics, international economics, development economics, industrial economics. We have so many branches of economics, all right? So I believe that at the undergraduate level, you will be considering those that will be considered important to your field as a business student. And so labor economics, of course, if you are entering into the corporate world, you should be able to understand clearly how the labor markets work, because once you find yourself in an industry and you'll be working, as long as there is some labor element in there, you would have to study labor economics. Managerial too was necessary because most of you will also find yourself being managers of corporate institutions one day. And so that means you would have to study managerial economics and understand how to make optimum decisions when it comes to production and cost, demand and supply, and the market structure itself. All right. So labor economics is the study of labor markets. That is the interaction between demand for labor and supply of labor. So the most important elements there will be the demand and supply, because in every market there are buyers and there are sellers. So there is demand, there is supply. So in the labor market, labor economics will study how the labor market interacts, okay, as far as demand for labor and supply of labor are concerned. And so we'll also seek how labor market institutions influence labor market outcomes. So as the lesson progresses, you will get to understand what labor market institutions are, all right? And another definition that you could consider for labor economics is that it is a branch of economics that studies the behavior of workers, employers, and government agencies in the labor market. So we are studying the behavior of these individuals in the labor market. So why do we have to study labor economics? The first one is that labor is a very crucial factor in the production of goods and services. In fact, in production, hardly will you have to ignore labor in the production of such goods and services, okay? And then another reason why you need to study labor economics is that when you get to understand labor market outcomes, all right, you will be able to know the important implications it will have for economic growth, income distribution, and social welfare. So for example, in the labor market, if we get to see that there are high levels of unemployment, we know that higher levels of unemployment can lead to lower economic growth because productivity will be very low. And it's also going to lead to increased poverty because people are going to find it very hard to actually earn some income and then be able to sustain a very good standard of living. So understanding labor market outcomes, you will be able to determine important implications for economic growth, income distribution, and social welfare. Another reason why you also have to study labor economics is that the labor market outcomes will have important implications for businesses and employers. So when that happens, businesses and employers can now make decisions on how many units of labor that they have to employ, what are some of the compensation plans that they can have for labor when they employ them, such as SNIT contributions or benefits or any sort of such sort of decisions that businesses and employers normally take when they bring labor into their institutions, all right? And then when you study labor economics, you will be able to understand the behavior of workers and firms in labor markets. And so that if it happens to be the government or the firms themselves, they will be able to create policies that will ensure that workers, the firms, and everybody interacting in the labor market will have better economic outcomes. So if the aim of the firm is to make profit, then we can create policies that can make sure that firms actually earn their profit. Now, recently in the news, I got to learn that there are other energy agencies besides the electricity company of Ghana who are actually generating electricity for Ghana. All right, there are, I think, one local energy agency, and then we have the rest of them are all foreign energy agencies. So what is happening is the Minister of Finance is trying to include them in the debt exchange, in the debt restructuring, because the government also owes these agencies, these power generating agencies. And so these power generating agencies are actually not agreeing to their involvement in the debt exchange. So they are also seeking that the government will have to pay them their arrears, because they would also have to purchase the materials that they need to make sure that electricity is generated. Actually, ECG as a corporate body does not depend or does not produce the energy itself, all right? So we do have some of these agencies who are producing some megawatts of power. So whenever ECG falls short of some of these load sheddings, then these agencies will now supply some of these megawatts of power so that the country can keep on running on electricity, so that this era of doomsday and those sort of things are out. But the government owes such power generating agencies, and so there is something like that. So the whole thing is, when you are studying labor economics, you get to understand how workers and firms in the labor market actually behave. At the end of the day, you will be able to create policies that will ensure that everybody will get better outcomes. So at the end of the day, if the government is to get better outcomes, so as the power generating agencies, they also need to get better outcomes. And then when you create that expertise in labor economics and you eventually become a labor economist, naturally, you may not become a labor economist because you are not studying that as a specialization. But the thing is, for whatever knowledge that you gather in this course, you are likely a labor economist as well, because you also understand how the labor markets work. And so you will be able to use a variety of tools, okay, such as maybe policies, legislations in labor, okay, so that you will be able to understand the labor market outcomes. And also you will be able to identify areas where policy interventions may be very, very effective. So one day, if you find yourself in a corporate institution and your CEO or your stakeholder, your manager, whoever calls you, says, you read business in Perez University, did you study labor economics? You say yes. And then they will just say that, oh, for our firm, in the market, we want to make sure that our goods, which are the inventories, all right, we want to clear them from the warehouses. And so as somebody who has studied labor economics, can you go into the market and conduct a research so that we will be able to create a policy that will make sure that we don't have so much inventories in the warehouses. We can actually dispose of them all, so that we can also make money and you can also be paid as well. All right. So as a labor economist, you should be able to advise the firm on how to achieve that. And so that is why we also need to study labor economics. So when it comes to the scope of economics in general, there are two statements that we need to consider. We have the positive economics and the normative economic statements, right? And so positive economics is describing economic phenomena, okay, describing and explaining economic phenomena the way that they are, okay? So there is no value judgment, there is no subjectivity, there are no opinions. You are just describing the economic situation the way they are. And so we normally summarize it as positive economics is concerned with what is, all right? So typical examples in Ghana's current situation, we know that Ghana is in debt distress and they seek IMF bailout. So when you make such a statement, you are making a positive economic statement. Currently, Ghana's unemployment rate stands at 13.9. So when you make that statement too, it is an objective fact. It is devoid of opinions. And so for that matter, that is a positive economic statement. If you also make a statement such as an increase in the price of coffee leads to a decrease in the quantity demanded of the good, yes, that is also a positive statement, because you are not bringing any sort of opinion, all right? You are just reflecting what the law of demand actually says, because whenever there is an increase in something, in the price of something, of course, the quantity demanded is going to increase. So there are no opinions here. Now, with normative economics, it is concerned with making value judgments, okay? When we say value judgments, you are making your own judgment, you are bringing in your own opinions, you are bringing in your own subjective ideas, okay, about economic outcomes. That is what normative economics is. So we simplify it to be normative economics is concerned with what should be or what ought to be. And so typical examples would include government should provide free healthcare for all citizens. So when you say government should, you are only expressing your opinion, and that is for normative economics. The government should increase the minimum wage to, let's say, 200 Ghana cedis a day to ensure a living wage for all workers in Ghana. When you make that statement, it is an opinion that you are expressing to the government on what action to take. If it happens that Ghana's minimum wage were to be 200 Ghana cedis a day, that would have been very fine considering the current economic situation. But unfortunately, that is not how it is. Okay. But anyway, we are just trying to say that when we talk about positive economics, you are describing economic situations the way they are. But when you talk about normative economics, you are actually expressing your own opinions or ideas about what should be done. In every market, there are buyers and sellers. In the labor market, the buyers are the employers because they are the ones that are going into the market to buy labor. The main commodity in the labor market, all right, is labor. Okay. So when you go to the market, as an employer, you are going to buy the labor. All right. And then as a worker, you are going to offer yourself for the work. You are going to offer yourself for employment. So you are selling yourself. You are selling a labor. So in the labor market, buyers are employers, sellers are workers. I believe that is very clear. And so when we talk about labor market in general, understanding the fact that we are looking at employers and workers, where employers are buyers and workers are sellers, the labor market will include all institutional arrangements that facilitate the interaction between buyers and sellers of labor. That is very simple. So labor market is trying to look at the interaction between buyers and sellers of labor. All right. Or we are looking at all the arrangements or measures that are put in place to facilitate the interaction between the demand for labor and the supply of labor. So when you do that, we have the labor market. All right. So when we talk about all institutional arrangements, we can think of, like, for instance, in Kumasi, where Mahama built that big market center. I don't know what they call it, but he built a very big market center for, I think, I've forgotten where it is actually, but it is there. All right. So that is also an institutional arrangement, like the facility or the structure itself, the building itself. If you go to Kaneshi as well, you see that there is a very big building, Kaneshi Market. Yeah, that is also an institutional arrangement. Other instances, there can be that maybe the government can actually give subsidies on certain goods so that prices of goods sold on the market can actually come low. All right. All those sort of things are the institutional arrangements that ensure that the interaction between buyers and sellers of labor become possible. That is what labor market is. Now, when we want to identify the forms of labor market, we can identify forms of labor market in terms of scope, occupation, region, contract, and sector. So when we talk about the scope, okay, of labor market, we are referring to whether a labor market is actually local. Like, for instance, you can think of a market for labor, a market where we are trading labor within a local community. So when that happens, that is going to be a local labor market. If we are looking at the trade of labor in the national context, we have a national labor market. If we are trading labor on international grounds, okay, that is one country and the other countries, we are looking at international labor market. Okay, so a typical example of international labor market would be the import of Cuban doctors. Some time ago, if you heard the news that they were importing some Cuban doctors to come to Ghana to work, yeah, that means they are trading labor at the international level. Okay. And then we also have in terms of occupation. Occupation also comes as a form of labor market. And we are looking at the specific job that you find yourself doing. So if you were a teacher, you were a lawyer, you were a nurse, you were a lecturer, okay, you were a trader, whatever job that you have or you are doing, you happen to fall under occupation as a form of labor. So you are also in the labor market. So when we are studying labor markets, how they work, you're also included. If we talk about labor market in terms of regions, we can look at the regional labor market. So for instance, we could have something like central regional labor market Eastern Regional Labor Market, Greater Accra Regional Labor Market. Or we can even, in terms of region, we can look at urban labor market, where there are a number of urban towns coming together to form a market where they trade labor. And we can also have rural labor markets. And a very good example of rural labor market will have to be those who normally engage in agricultural activities, the farming, right? The small scale subsistence farming. You notice that whenever they want to weed the farm, they go and hire some people that they normally call by day, okay? By day. It is by day, okay? They work by day. All right, so when you go and hire such people to actually come and work in your farm, you are operating within the realms of rural labor market. And then another form is contract. So you can have a formal contract, an informal contract, a full-time or a part-time. So just like I'm a part-time lecturer at Perez University, yes, of course, I fall under contract when it comes to the form of labor market. So yes, of course, I'm also part of the labor market. And then we can also think of it as a sector. So agricultural sector, manufacturing sector, the services sector. So the three sectors that we have in Ghana as well. All these form the forms of labor market. So you now know that the labor market is a platform, okay, or all the institutional arrangements that facilitate the interaction between buyers and sellers of labor. But we do have labor market institutions. And so labor market institutions refer to the various rules, regulations, the norms, the policies, the practices, okay, and organizations that affect the behavior of employers and workers in the labor market. All right, so all the regulations, all the rules, all the policies, the norms, all right, and organizations that take decisions which affect employers and workers in the labor market, they all come under labor market institutions. Okay, so for instance, if there is increase in the price of fuel, you would see that the Trade Union Congress, the GPRTU for that matter, will come together and then they will increase the price of fare. So they will adopt, should I call it a regulation, to increase the price of lorry fares, okay? And when that happens, of course, that affects the behavior of employers and workers in that labor market. Okay, so those are what we call the labor market institutions. So it means that if you are asked to distinguish between labor market and labor market institutions, you will be able to do so. So typical examples of labor market institutions, we have the labor unions, so the GPRTU, we have the Trade Union Congress. We have so many labor unions in Ghana. We have the NAGRAT, we have the NAT, Ghana National Association of Teachers, all right, all of them. We have CHAS, Conference of Heads of Assisted Secondary Schools. That is the conferences of headmasters. So labor unions are so many in this country. And then we can also have minimum wage legislation. So it means that labor market institutions are not just limited to organizations, all right? They are also, it also includes rules and regulations. So like if there is a minimum wage legislation, I think I have really forgotten, but if my memory serves me right, there was a time when such a regulation existed where the minimum wage for Ghana was, I think, 12 Ghana cedis per day. I don't know whether the value has changed as it stands now, but I do remember the last time I heard about that. It was 12 Ghana cedis a day. And when you go to the United States, it is $15 an hour. So just kind of imagine. But don't worry, it has to do with now context, okay, where we find ourselves. So we have to manage whatever we have here. All right. So minimum wage legislation, yeah, that is also a labor market institution. And then we also have employment protection legislation. So these are rules and regulations that are formulated to actually protect the worker and perhaps even the employer itself. So employment protection agencies, all right, these are all there. And such examples may include like the payment of Social Security, the SNIT. Yeah, it's all part of the employment protection legislation, because at the end of the day, when you retire, you should be able to earn some income. Now, the SNIT in itself would have been optional, because the thing is, when you contribute to SNIT, it's more or less like you are saving for the future. You are saving towards retirement. And so you should have a choice of whether or not you want to do so. But they know that if they made it optional, people might think that economic situations may not allow them to depend on only their what do you call it, their income, all right, the wages that they earn. And so when that happens, the government came in to bring about an employment protection legislation where contributions to SNIT are made compulsory. So when you find yourself in a work environment, it is compulsory for you to pay, all right? So back then it was optional, but now, for so many years now, it has been compulsory, all right, so that you can pay. So that's all part of the employment protection legislation. We also have social insurance programs where you can buy insurance for certain unforeseen circumstances. So many things are there that form the labor market institution. Yes, Eric, you have raised up your hand. What is the issue? You can unmute and then speak.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to chip in with the minimum wage legislation. I think it's now 14 to the 50 pesos. It was reviewed last year.
Yes, Eric.
Hello, sir.
Yes, okay, I can hear you now.
So the minimum wage in Ghana now, I think it was reviewed last year. It's now 14 to the 50 pesos.
Okay, all right. That is very good. So it's all part of the learning process, yes. So the minimum wage legislation says that now our minimum wage is 14 cedis 50 pesos per day. So it's all part of the minimum wage legislation, and for that matter, falls under labor market institutions, all right? The rules and regulations that affect the behavior of employers and workers in the labor market. That's very good. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we need to build up on the concepts of labor economics. So with time, okay, as we progress through the lesson subsequently, you'll be coming across certain terms that we'll be making use of. And so whenever we mention that term, you should be able to understand what that is. So we would like to explain what the concepts of labor economics are. So we are starting with the labor force. So when we talk about the labor force, we are referring to the total number of people who are either employed or actively seeking employment in a particular country or region. That is a labor force. So it means that we are just simply looking at those who are employed and those who are unemployed. If you remember, unemployment is actually a situation where people who are actively looking for jobs, but they are not getting. That is unemployment. So if this definition says we are looking at the total number of people who are either employed, so we are referring to those already in the labor market, already working, all right? And then those who are also searching for jobs, all right? When we put them together, we have the labor force. So it means that labor force includes both employed and unemployed individuals who are of working age. And in Ghana, the working age is 16 years or older. So if you are below 16 years and you are working, you are not counted as either employed or unemployed. You are not part of us. But when you are 16 years, then yes, if you are working, you will be counted as employed. And if you are searching for job, then you will also be considered as unemployed. All right. But we do have instances where some people are schooling. We'll look at whether they form part of unemployment or something like that. We'll look at them later. So labor force is simply employed plus unemployed. Now, at the end of this lesson, by tomorrow, I will have sent you an assignment that you have to do, and it involves some values there where you need to be calculating for labor force, you need to be calculating for unemployment rate and all those sort of stuff, all right? So please bring your mind to some of these formulas that I'll be giving in the slides. Okay, so when you ask to calculate for labor force, you just have to add those who are employed and those who are unemployed all together. Okay, of the working age. Yeah, they form the labor force. So with the labor force, okay, we are looking at those who are employed and those who are unemployed. And particularly, as for those who are employed, you know that the term there is just fixed. If you are working, all right, you are employed. So that is just okay. If you are 16 years or older and you are working, you are counted as one of those who are employed. But for those who are unemployed, we want to understand the categories of those who fall under unemployed, all right? So you notice that there are two buttons there, one included, one excluded. We are going to look at those who are to be included in the computation of labor force and those who are to be taken out, right? So we need to include individuals who are currently employed, okay? So they are part of the employed part of the labor force, okay? Labor force is employed plus unemployed. So those who are currently employed, even if it is only part-time, okay? So whether it is full-time, part-time, contract, formal, or informal, you are employed. So we include you when we are calculating labor force. individuals who are actively seeking employment. All right. So those who are searching for job, but they are not getting, those people will also be counted as part of the labor force. And actually, they come under unemployed. All right. So the first item, those who are currently employed will come under employed. Those who are actively seeking employment, they will come under unemployed. But when we add them, they still form the labor force. And then individuals who are available for work. All right. So some of them are not actively seeking for a job, but yes, they are available. Okay. They are available for work. So those people too, they will be part of unemployed. Okay. So when we talk about unemployed, we are looking at those of the working age population who are actually seeking for jobs or available for work, but they are not getting. Those are the unemployed people. And then the employed are those who are actively working, whether full-time or part-time or contract. So now, whether employed or unemployed, you must never add these people whenever you are calculating the labor force. One, individuals who are not seeking for employment. We normally call them discouraged workers. Discouraged workers. There are some people who are saying, well, yeah, I'm discouraged. I'm not going to work. I'm just going to stay at home. And I can cite typical example. Yeah, stay at home parents. All right. So for instance, guys, we normally like doing that. When you marry your wife, you just simply instruct her, you're not going to work. I don't want you to do any work. I will take care of you. When you do that, your woman actually becomes a discouraged worker, a person who is not seeking for employment. And then students, yes, if you're a student, you are not counted as part of those who are unemployed because you are not seeking for job. If you're a student and you are 16 years and above and you are seeking for work, yes, you can be counted as part of those who are unemployed. But if you're a student, like for instance, if you happen to be in junior high school, senior high school, those people, normally they do not have their concentration on work. They only think about the schooling because at that point in time, they are being taken care of by their parents. So such are the students that we are mentioning, not those at the universities. Okay, so many in the universities are students, but they are actually searching for jobs and some are already working. So when they fall within those categories, we can add them. But we are talking about those who are not actually searching for a job, even though they are capable of working. Then we have to exclude them. And then pensioners, those who have gone on pension, retirees, all right? So they are also not included in the unemployment or labor force calculation. And then individuals who are not available for work, all right? So you can see that on the left-hand side, the included, we have individuals who are actively seeking employment, individuals who are available for work. So these two, they form part of the unemployed because they don't have the work yet. They are available, they are seeking. So those who are not seeking, all right, you can see the direct opposite. Those who are not seeking, we don't add them. And the typical examples that we mentioned are the students, the retirees, the stay-at-home parents. And then those who are not available for work, especially those with disabilities, those in institutional care, all right? Institutional care like mental hospitals, those who are there, they are not counted, even though they are of the working age population, they are not counted as part of those who are unemployed because they are not available for work. And then those in the prisons, yes, they are also of working age population, but yes, those people are also not, because if you are in the prison, you're not allowed to go and do any work in Ghana, all right? They only use you for manual labor, but that is a sentence. And so that's not part of the whole thing. All right. So these are the people who are available, who are not available for work. They are also excluded. Then the second concept that we need to look at is unemployment rate. So when we talk about unemployment rate, we are looking at the proportion of the labor force that is unemployed. That means we are looking at the ratio of those who are unemployed to the labor force. So we simply take unemployed and then we divide by the labor force and then we get the unemployment rate. We multiply by 100% so that we get it in a percentage. So I think as it stands now, Ghana's unemployment rate is around 13 point something percent. All right. Around 13 point something percent, the latest, I think, search that I made. So you have to, when you're calculating the labor force, you are adding those who are employed and those who are unemployed together to get the labor force. And after that, if you are asked to calculate for unemployment rate, you will take the unemployed, you divide by the labor force, multiply by 100%, you get the unemployment rate. So don't overlook some of these formulas as well, as I keep saying. The next concept is labor force participation rate, LFPR. labor force participation rate. And it is the proportion of the working age population that is either employed or actively seeking employment. Now, the last phrase, either employed or actively seeking employment, makes up what we call employed or unemployed. So it's just like that. So it is a proportion of the working age population that is either employed or unemployed. That is how we've just placed it in there, right? So when you have those employed and unemployed, you add them, you have the labor force, right? Yes, you have the labor force. So when you divide the labor force by the working age population of the people, all right, the entire population, we have the labor force participation rate. So we are looking at the proportion of, okay, the proportion of the population that is employed or unemployed. That is the labor force participation rate. So it is a ratio of labor force to the working population. So labor force participation rate is labor force divided by total population. So the proportion of the total population that is in the labor force, that is the proportion of the total population that is either employed or are actively seeking for employment. And so these are also the concept: wages, earnings, compensation, and income. So when we use the term wages, you need to understand where we are coming from. Earnings, compensation, income, you're going to understand the differences between them. So when we talk about wages, we are referring to payment for a unit of time. Okay, so we are looking at a time period, we pay you, that's your wages. So wages apply to payment received by workers who are paid on a salaried basis. So, normally, it's monthly rather than hourly. So if you're receiving hourly pay, it is no wages, all right? If you're receiving monthly salaries, then that is wage. But when we talk about earnings, it refers to wages multiplied by the number of time units, typically the number of hours that you've worked. So in the United States, where they pay based on hours, okay, the unit of time worked, we would say that those are their earnings, not wages, because they normally don't receive payments at the end of the month, all right, unless there is another arrangement that you come with the employer to pay you per month. But we look at the number of hours that you've worked, and then even if we have to pay you at the end of the month, but for instance, in a day, if you are working like 4 hours, we would say 4 hours times, assuming we're excluding weekends, so maybe about 20 days, okay, in an entire month. So if you are working 4 hours each day times 20 days, you have about 80 hours. So if the wage per hour, okay, is maybe $15, it's going to be $15 times the 80 hours. Okay, so the wage rates times the unit of time worked, that would give you the earnings, okay, for the month, for a week, for any number of period. And then compensation, when we talk about total compensation, actually, we are looking at the earnings. Remember, the earnings is the wages times the unit of time worked. So when we say earnings, it means we are looking at wages, all right, times the unit of time worked, plus employee benefits. The benefits you get for being an employee in a particular company or institution will all come under what we call total compensation, all right? The benefits that are either payment in kind or deferred. So sometimes a typical example is, I remember when I was about starting my master's in UW, when the department, the lecturers actually went on a retreat program. That retreat program was funded by the school, all right? So we went to Mankasim, one Manor Heights hotel, to structure the postgraduate, like Master of Science, Master of Philosophy in Economics programs for National Accreditation Board. So we went there for 3 days and it was funded by the school. So those are what we call compensation, all right? So they are either payment in kind or deferred. They are not payment in cash. We don't give it to you in cash, all right? And if you also go to, if you're a lecturer in UW and then you buy a vehicle, they give you what we call vehicle allowance. Okay, that one, it's also compensation, but the idea is that your fuel is being paid and some money is being paid to whoever is maintaining your vehicle. So although that money can be given to you, but the ideal situation is they are paying whoever is maintaining the vehicle, or they are paying the filling station for giving you fuel. All right. Unlike in the United States, where the government can give some of these instances to workers, they just park their car by the filling station, they go and pull the pump themselves, and then and just buy the fuel. All right. So such instances, all right, it means that that is clearly the payment in kind or deferred. Okay. All right. So, for instance, employer-provided healthcare. So, like the National Health Insurance Scheme, it's some kind of compensation that is given to everybody, right? Workers or non-workers, it is given to you. So that is also part of compensation. And then paid vacation time. Yes. So sometimes we have institutions that would say, well, you've worked with us for 10 years now. We are going to pay for your travels and your hotel fees to go to Dubai and rest for 1 month and come back. All right. That also is total compensation. So your earnings plus employee benefit will give you the total compensation. All right. So these are rather than cash. So if you want to get total compensation, it means that it is earnings, okay, plus employee benefits. That is what it is. And then income. Income is the total resources of the person during some time period, normally usually a year. So if you are working in a corporate body and you are taking like 2,000 Ghana cedis, at the end of the year, 2,000 times, if you have other compensations, okay, so let's just talk about the money itself. So if you are taking 2,000 a month for the whole year, that means you are taking about 24,000 Ghana cedis. So that 24,000 is your income. All right. So you wouldn't want to call the 2,000 Ghana cedis that you get at the end of the month income. That is called the wage. All right. So the total resource of the person during some time period, usually a year. And so it includes your earnings, your benefits, and unearned income. The unearned income include dividends. When we talk about dividends, okay, as business students, I know you know dividends. So when you invest, you buy shares in a company, and then they pay you your profits, okay, your part of the share, that is called the dividend. Okay, the part of the profit that you get based on your share is called the dividend. All right. So when you receive that one, that is what we call unearned income. It means that you did not work actually for it. It's just some sort of shares that you bought and then the money just came. Interest that you receive on investment. So when you invest, you are not actually working, but there's some sort of money that is coming as interest on the investment. That is also what we call unearned income. And we also have transfer payments. Transfer payments are those that are received from the government. All right. So there are instances where, for instance, as I was doing my master's, there is this graduate school. I think still they are under the government. They give us what we call research allowance. All right. So that research allowance is also an unearned income. We could consider research allowance as transfer payment. So if you're even a lecturer in the university, you are giving research allowance, consider that as a transfer payment from the government to conduct research. All right. So your income is simply the total compensation. Remember that the total compensation is your earnings plus employee benefits, right? So it is earnings, employee benefits plus unearned income, which comprises interest on investment, dividends, and transfer payments. That all together gives you your income. Okay, so at this point, we'll bring this lesson to an end. And so if you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll be glad to answer you. All right, so at this point, I think I can stop the recording and we can now go to question time.